Hello, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
Hey, and I'm Danya Williams. How are you guys doing today?
Hope you guys are having a blessed and happy Sunday.
Yeah,
So, without
we
further
aren't.
yes, we've had a bit of a challenge today.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our scheduled guest, Desmond from the Buffalo Soldier Museum in Houston, wasn't able to join us today. So instead, and we apologize for that. These things happen sometimes. Welcome to live online broadcasts. So instead, we think we've come up with a topic that you will find equally interesting, and we are sure you guys are going to have loads of questions. So today, we're going to talk about researching ancestors who changed their names, and hopefully, we will give you some tips and tricks and advice on how to find them.
Yes. Yes. So I guess I can start it. I have a friend who kind of contacted me a couple of days ago, and she was talking about how she wanted to find her grandmother, and they had been trying to find her and everything. And we talked and was going through the whole what's the birth date, what's the death date, do you know who her parents are, all of those basic questions that we normally ask. And when I came to her, when she finally told me, yeah, it's the mom, that we can't find her parents, that's when she turned around and I told her, I said, oh, well, that's because that's not her name. And she was like, what? I said, yeah, that's not her name. So there's another name for her. And sure enough, the name that she originally went by, that wasn't the name that they needed. And when they figured out the other name, I don't want to put her out there or anything like that, but when they figured out the other name, that's when they started at least finding more people. They started finding her siblings and finding, different folks like that. So name changes are huge, especially in African American families. And I mean, I'm sure it's big on our European families as well, but for African American families, name changes are huge.
I'm going to say for the kind of European descended Americans that I've researched, I've only ever come across a handful that did change their surname. Most of them changed it, they just altered it just a little bit. So they were kind of keeping the flavor and the feel of the family surname. And the whole kind of long story short is there was a falling out amongst siblings. People were feeling some kind of way. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
dad and mom left someone more property than they left someone else. However it happened, they fell out. So, for instance, my Reed family, which is typically spelled Reed, all of a sudden became one of the brothers decided, well, I don't like my family anymore, so I'm going to go by Red, Redd.
Wow.
Kind of a
Well, you remember the Cummings family? It'd be Cummings family in Edgefield. It was they're a mix of Cummings and Gilchrist.
yes.
So this story I was told, I believe it was the Cummings. It's one or the other. One of those families went in school. The children went in school with one surname and came out with the other, all for the same reasons that you were just saying, Brian. Um, yeah, because somebody got angry, somebody got upset, and because they just didn't want to be along with that family anymore, so they changed the children's names. Now, here's where the issue comes in. Even though those children's names changed, their blood didn't.
Yes.
So when we're doing DNA research, and all of a sudden you're popping in these people and they're like, oh, but my name is Gilchrist. They have no idea when you go for, that their actual name was Cummings at first. So it's a whole big issue. It's a whole new thing. And yeah, yeah.
Well, we have a really good example because again, if your family had a history of staying in roughly the same place for a long period of time, there are ways that you can still find them. And I apologize to everyone because we really are doing this off the top of our head, so we may get some family names mixed up here. But what I'm thinking about was either it was a Yeldow who changed their name to Harrison, or it was Harrison who changed it to Yeldow.
I'm gonna bring that up.
So, okay, I'm going to say that the way they did it was from Yeldow to Harrison.
It
So
was.
they were living in Edgefield, and we kept looking for this man and his family under the name Yeldow, and we could not find him for love nor money. And I think Donnie and I found the same census at the same time, or one
It
of
was
the.
an article.
Oh, it was not. No, it was the
This,
census. It was the census. It was the 1880 census.
are you talking about Shepherd?
No.
Oh, so you're
No.
talking about the other person, because Shepherd did the same thing.
Yeah, we can talk about Shepherd next. So in 1870, he and his family started with the name Yeldow. 1880, they ended up with Harrison, but we didn't know that at the time. And the way that we found them is they were still living either in the same town in Edgefield County or in a neighboring town. All the first names were the same. All of the years of birth so what we decided to do was to look for a family group. We looked for him, we looked for his wife and his kids, and we found them in 1880, only because their year of birth kind of remained consistent from census to census. And their first names didn't change. So it took a little, remember, it took us we had that conversation for 5 or 10 minutes going, do we really have the same people? Is this really the same family? And then it was like child's death certificate. It was a conflict. It was a conflict in the surname with the death certificates. Some kids still called him Yeldow. Other kids called him Harrison, even though they took the Harrison name.
You're talking about, it wasn't Harrison. It was Quarles.
Quarles. That's it.
That was Yeldow Quarles, because that was also the same time that we found a doppelganger family that was white. With the same names, the same, even the children had the same names.
They did.
Everybody's birth dates was the same. It was the exact same amount of kids. It was the biggest. Like I said, Yeldows, if you have them in your family, I am sorry. The research on them is amazing. It's a test. It's a testing. It's a test like no other. Like it's a test. Yeldow research is in just a crazy test. I'm telling you.
So sticking with and I'm sorry, I can't remember your first name, Mr. Quarles, but just sticking with him for a minute. The way that we found him was we went to the 1880 census, started on the first page, and we were just looking for, like I said, specifically a family group with the same first names. Because I think at that time, we just assumed that either the census enumerator butchered the last name, which is possible,
or they changed it.
Or that they changed it.
And it was James.
That was it.
Mm-hmm. I remember, because I remember they scarred me. It was just amazing. I'm like, who in the world has a family with the exact same name? The whole family. And it was two. That's what they did. But then, since I said something about Shepherd.
Oh, but there was one other clincher is in the 1880 census, we also looked at the families that they were living there. Who was living in the household, who was living in the properties that kind of adjoined theirs.
Right.
That really didn't change too much. So that was kind of the clincher for us. We knew that we had the right family.
Yeah, that's how we figured it out.
So now for Shepherd, because that was a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, the Shepherd guy. So Shepherd Harrison is his name, and he had anywhere from 15 to 16 children.
He did.
And we found a article in the paper about him, because we kept seeing this census record with a guy named Shepherd Yeldow. That's what it was. But we could never find Shepherd Harrison. And then one day we found a newspaper article. And in the newspaper article, we learned that Shepherd Harrison had lived to be about 105.
105.
Yeah, he was about 100. He lived to be around 105 years old. And so they were celebrating him in the paper. They were actually even though it was a while ago, it was I guess it was the late early 1950s or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they were celebrating him in the paper, and they would every year he would have something going on. So this was like 103. He was at 103, and the article was talking about him, and he spoke in the article, and he was like, "Oh yeah," he was like, "I'm really a Yelldale. I changed my last name to Harrison because that's when I moved to the Harrison plantation." So let me tell y'all, y'all know how bad I am. Y'all know me. When I tell y'all I cussed like the biggest sailor to ever walk the face of this earth, I was ready to throw my computer out the window. Because if he had not said that in that particular article, we wouldn't have never really understood it. What was going on, or it would have taken us longer.
I would say that that's true because we didn't necessarily have a link between the Quarles and the Harrison families to make us think that someone would swap from one name to
Yelldale and Harrison.
Yelp
Yelldale and
and Harris. That's right.
right.
To think that someone would swap one surname for
For
that
the
one.
other.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we had a link, but that was only that was in my family, where Mary Palmore and all that other stuff. That's another show. But yeah, that when all of that happened, but overall we never thought anything different. We never, we never, it was just amazing. And it wasn't until he gave us that information, and I'm sitting here reading this, that's when I realized I think that's when I really started to realize how much slavery messed up the Black family. That's when it hit me. I think that's when it personally hit me.
In terms of surnames and things, in what way did it mess up the Black
The
family?
separation. And then all of a sudden, when you go from one plantation to the next, the name changes. So because the name has changes, if you separated a sister and a brother, and the sister stayed the Yelldale and the brother became the Harrison, and then they had children that never met each other, those children then all of a sudden meet and they fall in love. And you never realize that that's your actual family that you're falling in love with.
But wouldn't that depend on the age in which the family was split apart?
Possibly. I mean, there are other, things that comes with it, but those are the things that happen. This man changing his name and then changing his children's name, all 15 or 16 of those kids to Harrison, we never knew.
Mm.
We never knew as researchers. And then with my mom's uncle marrying Mary Palmore, him having 4 children with him, then he dies and she turns around and marries a Harrison. It's just like, yeah, they're siblings, but they were probably cousins a long time ago. Her children that she had with the Harrison and her children that she had with the Yelldales, they're now siblings. But somewhere down the line, they're cousins too, because those Harrisons are possibly Yelldales.
I would say the greater challenge would be for a very young child to be separated from their parents
Yes.
and sold completely out of the community. So the chances are pretty high that they wouldn't know who their people were. I'm going to say in my ancestry that really hasn't been the case. They, even if they were enslaved by a different family or they went out of the family, they seem to have known exactly who they were. Um, they may not have always chosen the most obvious surname, which is what I wanted to get into, is no matter what ethnicity you're researching, if you have an inkling that there might be a surname change, which is making it really difficult to find your people or the person you're looking for, that's when you have to really dig deep and start looking at other names in that family. So we have family relations who, for whatever reason, took their mother's name, her maiden name, and not their father's name, um, which is something that you're gonna have to factor in as well.
Right.
I don't see that happening too much on my kind of European ancestry side, unless they were like natural born children. they would normally take the mother's name and not the father's name, and you need, DNA to figure out who the father was. Um, but pretty much, like I said, whether I'm looking at Virginia, North Carolina, no matter where they were, whether they were free or enslaved, they did seem to know the family names. Now, why they would choose perhaps one family name over another one, I couldn't tell you. And that was a nice segue to go into John Gildow. Where did John, where did John, we have a man called John Gildow who got into some bother in South Carolina, had to leave, um, and then came up with he just had the name Elijah Fleming. And I could see, maybe changing the first name, but I mean, he completely changed his name.
He went through a whole Underground Railroad type change.
And it's only recently, many years after you discovered this story, that you even have an inkling why he chose the Fleming name. Because
Yes.
remember, we always asked that question. We didn't know where that name came from. It didn't make any sense to us. We didn't. It wasn't a predominant name in the
Yeah.
part of Edgefield that he lived in. So it's like, where did this man get the name? And you found that out again through a newspaper article.
Through a newspaper article. No, the Elijah Fleming, yeah, it was through his dad. That's right. Yeah. But now we've gone even further. But I'm actually gonna write more about that and when I redo my book. But yeah, Elijah was definitely a case. But so the thing is, we want to address how do you go about finding these particular people. So we have questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, I'm sure we do.
yeah, but so I want to address while I have questions, but some of them are asking about Buffalo Soldier and so on and so forth. So Trudy asked, are we going to discuss the Buffalo Soldiers anyway? No, not today.
It was more about the museum
Right.
and the work that it does in terms of promoting the Buffalo Soldiers. I mean, I can do a quick spiel about them. Um,
Yeah, but we want to, we want to be able to go in depth. So I think Brian and I, what we will do as far as that is concerned, we will set up a show specifically about Buffalo Soldiers, regardless of whether our guests can make it the next time. We will definitely set up a show about Buffalo Soldiers. So we do apologize for that. Another thing that I wanted to address, and I think Brian is better at explaining this because we had a question about the stars on here. So if you explain to them what the stars are with the emoticons and things, because someone asked about it.
oh, okay. Sorry, that's so new. It took me a while to figure out what that was about. So basically, the stars are if if you're really enjoying an episode, um, you can kind of show us some love by clicking a star. And I believe if you click a star, it's like a fundraising thing. So I think it's like 1 cent per star that someone clicks on
Okay.
is how that works.
All right. So now that we've gotten all that out the way, here's the first question. Jesse Affelder. That's a nice name. Jesse Affelder, how would I find legal name changes? What if they never actually had their name changed legally? That's an excellent question.
And I'm going to actually say, depending on the time period, the
It
chances
wasn't
are
legal.
it wasn't legal.
Yep.
They just changed their names.
Yep.
I'm going to even go even further to say that if they were people of color, whether they were enslaved or free, whether they were Black, Hispanic, like Latinx, whatever, and they were living in a really rural, poor area, they wouldn't have had money
Yep.
to afford a lawyer
Yep.
to do the paperwork. They would have just changed the name.
Right. So how would you find them? You have to, that's why newspapers are so important.
Well, also going back to the beginning, the couple of examples that we gave, and I'm going to use Martha Brooks for this. So my advice would be to really nail down all of the members of that family in that household. So if you have them in 1870, and then all of a sudden you just cannot find them in 1880, You know who, hope you will have a good picture of who the mother is, who the father is, who the kids are, at least their first names. You know where they were living in 1870, you know where they were born in 1870. Sticking in the same town or surrounding towns, or at least the same county, I would go to the 1880 census for that county, and you start on
Page
image,
one.
image one
Yep.
of that roll of images. It is time consuming.
Yep.
It's laborious. So if you
Yep.
have music that you enjoy listening to or something on the television,
Put them in
you
your
go,
ears.
yep, you
Just
go
start
from
looking.
image to image from image one to two to three, and you work your way through,
Yeah.
hoping, because there's no guarantee. I'm not going to say you're going to get, you're guaranteed to find them, but that's your first best shot.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then the other, and again, like I was saying, newspapers. Newspapers help you out a lot. You can search for a child, start searching for the children, or search for I know this sounds crazy, but search for the wife. Look for those birth years, those birthdays, look for marriage information or death information, because obituaries are like everything. My cousin Hamad went to his aunt's funeral this weekend in Edgefield, and what did he do? I just hit love, 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 love on the thing, because he took a picture of the front and the inside of her program, which showed her obituary, which gave all of the information about her. It makes such a difference. Everything that's there, it made such the difference. So that way you can fill out that information. You get that, you start to learn more about the person. That's what's so great about genealogy. You start to learn about the people and what they did and where they were, and so on and so forth.
and going back to the question, there is another tool, and again, it's a little shameless plug for my book, Practical Genealogy, is called a fan club, FAN club, family and neighbors. If you still can't find the family that you're looking for in the 1880 census, start looking, go back to the 1870 census, look at the families that are living around the family that you're trying to research, and find them in the 1880 census.
Right.
Then start looking around, and especially if they're still in the same place or close, start looking around for your family group, looking for the first names that you're already really familiar with.
Right. Right.
And,
So another question. She says, my family, as far as I know, but many of my family lived in Clarendon in Jamaica. Going, okay, she might not have been talking to us. Let me see. It's not a question, but this is a statement. Gina Lewis says, so true. Had this happened in my family, surname Jones, from slave master when they were freed. One family member changed his surname from Jones to Bass after the second slave master who married the widow Jones. Still living in the area of all his family, down the way he married his first cousin. No one was the wiser because his wife had a different surname Springfield, but her mother was a Jones. See, that's what I'm saying, Brian. They may not know, and they end up marrying their own, and it's crazy.
as opposed to some of our family who knew that they were marrying their cousins.
Okay. Okay. So I think people are okay. I'm gonna say this again to Trudy and to Joe. The Buffalo, so we did post on our genealogy page stating that our person could not make it. We do apologize if that's what you tuned in for to hear. As I stated earlier, we will do another show on it, and we will make sure that you hear that. I can only apologize for that. So today we are doing surnames. Now I'm gonna go and pass all that. Agnes Marie Evans says, I have a female Eliza J. Flemings that married a Ephraim H. Virgil in South Carolina, born 1863, no parents. So it was a man, and it was Elijah, Elijah, and it wasn't Fleming, it was Flemon, Flemon. The name seems so made up, it's ridiculous. But we did find out that it was an actual real name. Um, but he definitely went through the name change like crazy. But hey, you might be related because Fleming eventually did turn into Fleming in certain instances. So
So I'm going to do a little. I'm going to do a little recap because we're kind of at the half hour. So again, for all of you who are just joining us on the show, unfortunately, our guest from the Buffalo Soldier Museum wasn't able to join us. It happened at the last minute. There's nothing that we could do about it, unfortunately. It wasn't really a show for. We were going to talk a bit about Buffalo Soldiers in the history, but it was really about the museum. And since Donnie and I, neither one of us are affiliated with the museums or an employee of the museum, we can't really speak about it. So we apologize. Unfortunately, sometimes these things happen. And as Donnie said, we will, if we can't reschedule with this particular museum, we will get someone on the show who can talk about Buffalo soldiers, the histories, the record sets, all of that information. So again, our heartfelt and sincere apologies on that, but unfortunately, our guest wasn't able to arrive on the day.
okay, Stacy Ashmore, she said in Liberty County, Georgia, in 1886, Samuel McConnell changed his and his children's surname to Cassell in court because Cassell had been his father's name. I lost it. His father's name, he said, whereas he chose McConnell after emancipation because it had been his master's name. Now he wanted to make sure his father's name was perpetuated. Just an example of the gems in the court records. There are some things in court records that can show those legal name changes and so on and so forth. But when you're thinking about right after the Civil War, they gave and once they were freed, they actually gave those freed enslaved people the option to just drop a name and go the opposite direction. So like what he was talking about with my two-time our great grandmother, Martha was a Brooks. She was a Brooks because she was, number one, a child of the Brookses, and number two, she was enslaved by them. She was enslaved by her father. She was a child of. But in 1880, she changed her children's last name, not hers, her children's last name to the name that my family carries now, which is Gildow. Um, I feel like she kept the name Brooks because she knew that was her, because that was her name. Not that she knew, we were going to research later, but that was her name. You know, she was like, I'm a Brooks and that's who I am and I'm going to keep it. But I'm going to change my children's last name to Gildow. Now, why is she changing to Gildow? I don't know. I don't know. And we've been trying to figure that out. But we do know that the white Gildows in Edgefield were very different from the other white enslavers. They did things that was just not like other white enslavers. First and foremost, what white enslaver did you know buried their dead with their families, whether they were black or white? Didn't happen. They did that. That was something that they did. They also gave their enslaved people really great jobs. They made sure they could read and write and all of that. So they were a different group. So maybe that's why she changed the name to them. Maybe the person that she had the children by was with the enslaving family and she gave them. I don't know. I don't know, but it definitely happened. So
So really, the only scenario that I don't have a cut and dried kind of formula for And Elijah Fleming would fall into this because that was a fluke. It was only a newspaper article that gave his old name and his new name together that kind of did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of scenarios where you have a family or you have an ancestor who got into a spot of bother, had to get out of Dodge, had to get out of Dodge really quick, had to hide. So you were talking about someone who not only left the county, left the state. Now, if they changed their name, my hunch is you're really going to have to rely on DNA.
Yep.
Hopefully, they had more descendants who had descendants who are alive today and can do DNA testing.
Yeah.
I can't I For that scenario, I can't really think of any other alternative.
Yeah. So we have another question from Jen Liu. She says, how do you document what you think is a name change if there are no official records? Do you just write a narrative? I believe my research leads me to believe. You want to go first?
Sure. What I would do is I would actually write like a thesis, basically. Go into your whatever word processing program you have, like MS Word, and you start from the beginning. This with all the pertinent information that you have before the name change. So the person's name, where they were born, who their parents were, the year that they were born, who they married, kids, all of if you have that information already, put that in. And then it's like writing a proof theorem.
Yep.
You start with the document, and I would actually put the document in, sorry, I would actually put the image of the records that you're using in the document and start spelling, I believe that this document with this new name pertains to this ancestor because, and then you just start, like I said, writing your kind of your proof theorem, save it as a PDF, and if you're using a program like Ancestry, upload that to the gallery as a document, and then actually put a comment to say, please see document name in my gallery with information about the name of your ancestor.
Right. Well, I didn't do all that, but I do because I didn't. I didn't. I did it personally. I didn't do it for my actual tree because my tree is for family only. Even though people can see my tree is not hidden, but my tree is really for family only. So when they look at it, they already have that information, a lot of that information there. But using Martha again as an example, what I did, because we don't know why she changed that name, what did happen was the will for her father, this was how we figured out that was her father. Because in the will, he actually stated that he was giving a certain number of enslaved children to his wife that she had to care for and give gifts annually. These particular number of enslaved people meant something to him for some kind of reason. Then, and my 2 times great grandmother was one of those people. Then there was.
Can you hold that thought just a second?
Mm-hmm.
So what Don is talking about in terms of doing, especially genealogy for enslaved people, you get to become very familiar with the kind of language that enslavers were using in their wills and in their probate records. If you come across a really unusual kind of statement about your ancestor or people that are in a will, you need to pay close attention to that. So Martha was treated differently, and the Brooks family were large-scale enslavers. So the fact that Zachariah Brooks selected a handful of his enslaved people to be treated differently than all the rest, Whitfield, sorry, is significant.
Yep.
Same with Moses Williams. In the enslaving Williams family, he was one of 3 enslaved people out of hundreds that was allowed to choose
where he wanted to go.
Where he wanted to go.
Right.
So yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to say.
No, that was very important. And it was important because I was taking it into Lemuel when we found her with Lemuel, and he had Lemuel, which was a cousin. He had a good number of slaves, but when we found the contract of his enslaved people, and her contract was set separately from the rest of them. I mean, in one contract he was saying, you know, things like, if your children are unruly, I got a right to whoop them. You know, I got things like that, just stuff that you don't feel comfortable with. But then in her contract, oh yeah, I'm gonna give you $600. I'm gonna make sure everybody is taken care of. You guys, the food, the clothing, this, then everything was done. There was a total difference in how she was treated and how the rest of the enslaved, and these contracts were back to back. They were together.
Just so that for people who don't know what Dong is talking about, when she's saying contracts, these were labor contracts that were raised by the Freedmen Bureau at the end of slavery
Right.
for the enslaved people and their well, most of the time it was their former enslavers. Sometimes it wasn't,
Right.
but whoever it was they went to work with, it was the terms and conditions of their employment.
Right.
So when
So
Dong says contracts, that's what she's talking about.
right. And so with that being said, learning, knowing that information pretty much gave me the knowledge to say, okay, yes, we are definitely Brooks. We are definitely that Brook. We definitely come from that Brooks line. As far as the Gildow name is concerned, I'm still working on it. And everything that Brian was saying, as far as doing their whole thesis and proof theorem and all that other stuff, I've done it, but I've done it for myself personally. So I know my line, I know where I am, and I update it every now and then. I mean, like I've said to you guys before, genealogy is another form of geometry. It's a proof. You have to prove, just like geometry, you have to prove if that angle is actually an angle. You have to write your hypothesis for it. You have to go through all of these different things. You have to take all these steps. That's the exact same thing that you have to do when you're doing genealogy in certain instances.
And
So,
when you are actually writing your proof theorem for your genealogy kind of problem that you're solving, always ensure, even though you're putting the actual images of documents you're referring to, always remember to source and cite your material.
everything.
As
That's right.
anyone else researching the same family should be able to download what you've written, read it, and be able to go to the exactly find the same documents and be able to reach the same conclusions that you
Right.
have.
So Jesse wanted to know where to find those contracts. We actually found them on Family Search because they're
Yeah,
not on
I
there.
think that's what there is a there's the Freedmen Bureau website, and I don't remember the URL for that. They're available there, but they're also available for free on FamilySearch.org, and they are a gold mine of information.
But I don't think those contracts are on the free one. Not those.
I've pulled a few. The depth of what they
Yeah,
have on that site.
I don't remember finding them there. I don't remember finding those same ones. So some they have some, but the Family Search is a good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see more.
And
My
while
grandfather
Donnie is
George
looking
A.
at
Clark.
questions, another strategy that you might want to employ is, again, depending on the research that you've done and whether or not the person you're looking for had siblings. Also try to research other family members. Obviously, the closer the family member is biologically to the person you're searching, may also yield some results. Because again, we have family coming specifically out of South Carolina that actually left Edgefield together as family groups. I'm thinking of the Suttles in particular, because a lot of them went to the Raleigh-Durham area. So whenever we get stuck, looking for a cousin that was related to the Suttles, because remember, the Suttles went, the Petersons, their cousins went, their Williams cousins went. They were all people from their kind of immediate but extended family were moving to North Carolina with them. And in some instances, to find a Peterson or a Williams, and I can't remember some of the other cousins that, the Holloways went with them. sometimes we had to look at cousins and aunts and uncles, and again, look at who was living around them in order to try to find the people that we were looking for.
So A.E. Barlow says, why is proof theorems necessary for the non-PhD genealogist, especially if there's no intention of publishing? Again, in my opinion, you do that for your own purposes. Like we were saying earlier, Brian was giving you the way to do that so that you can have that info and share it with others if they look at it. But I do them personally. And I do it just for myself. I don't do it for everybody. And one of the reasons why I don't do it for everybody is because they don't take the time in most instances to read on the trees anyway.
This is true.
The comments, those different things, they're going to put what they want to put anyway. I mean, just recently I was talking with Loretta about some Holloways, and we found that our Luke Holloway was placed on a European tree because, as far as they were concerned, he was a white European. He was a European Luke Holloway, but he wasn't. The one he wasn't. And they did not take the time to look. They did not take the time to read the notes, because you have notes on Luke Otis Holloway. I even have notes on Luke Otis Holloway. Loretta has never. No, there was no reading on it whatsoever. It was there. And I'm like, wow, okay. So, I mean, they don't even read them. So in my opinion, it's best to do those things just for your own mind and organization, so that as you're going through your stuff, and if you happen to come across something else, you can refer back to it, and it keeps you organized.
And it can also save you having to respond to a lot of messages on Ancestry.com, or just a lot of questions. Because basically anything that you would have responded to someone with is already in that document. I tend to use them, I've been using them more when we have people with a repeating name in a family, like Mary Holloway, because it's easy enough to get two Mary Holloways from the same place, born roughly around the same time as each other, confused for one another. Like Emily Peterson. Just like Emily Peterson, there are two Emily Petersons born 18 months apart who were like first or second cousins from a massive extended family. And I had to basically write a proof theorem to prove which one was my direct ancestor and the other one who was like an ancestral cousin. But it's still, it's getting us a little bit away from talking about how to actually find people whose names have changed. So here's a question for you, Donnie. What if you're struggling to find someone? How can we differentiate between the possibility that that person died, because there's always that possibility, or that they just flat out changed their name, or they just left the area? They could still carry the same name. They just left the area, left the state, left the colony.
Somebody like that. We weren't sure if they had died or not. You want to know how do I differentiate it? I use newspapers. I source, I do a lot of searching on newspapers. Matter of fact, that's how I found Moses. That's what happened. Because we couldn't find a death for Moses Jr.
That's right.
And that's how it was Moses. I couldn't find a death for Moses Jr. And I'm like, okay, well, let me get it in the newspapers. And we started looking for stuff for that. And we ended up finding his father. And that's how that happened. I go to newspapers. As a matter of fact, I don't think I still have a death for Moses.
No, I was going to say that the irony being we never did find a date of death or even a year of death for Moses Jr. We just know at what point.
Yeah, but we found everything for his dad.
Yeah, we just know at what point he no longer appears in the records. And we know he didn't leave because we know all of his kids, all of Moses Jr. kids,
right,
he's still there.
Right. Now, there's one thing that has us completely out. I mean, Totally.
Which one's that?
Seniors.
Yes. Oh, that. Do you want to talk about that? Because that's also another really interesting case.
Um, Wait a minute. Somebody's saying something about something's inaudible somewhat. Estelle, could you? Is this?
Oh, is that me or is it you?
That's what I'm getting ready to ask her. Is Estella? Could you tell us who's inaudible and just kind of let us know? So we're gonna go into the seniors, but someone asked you because you're breaking up, Danya. I'm breaking up. I don't know what to do.
Try muting and then unmuting your mic. Let's see if that'll do anything.
Do you have a headset?
Let me see what I can do here. So
She
Danya,
said it's very staticky for both.
okay. Let me mute and unmute real quick. Give me 1 second. Then I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Try muting and unmuting. Oh, I can't hear you at all now.
Oh, try unmuting now, Danya. Yeah. Your microphone icon to the left.
Is that better?
It's still a little staticky. Let me see here.
How's that?
Still a little staticky. Let me see if I can refresh the meet. I'll jump back in. You guys stay on. Give me 1 second.
Okay, hold on 1 second, everyone. We're trying to figure out what's going on.
Broadcasting in the time Hi, everyone. Sorry about the technical glitches on top of everything else. But in the closing minutes, I've got a couple of really great questions that I just wanted to read out. So from K. Clark, and this is a really good question. My grandfather is George A. Clark, but I can't locate his mother, who he put on his live birth request as Katie Pruitt in Marianna, Arkansas, or Arizona. I only find a 9-year-old Katie Pruitt, 1870 census, but I can't locate her or her family on any further census documents. She couldn't find where her ancestor married a Mr. Clark, or how the Clark family name came to be, as there are no Clarks on the Mariana censuses. So as I was saying earlier in the show, if you have a handle on what her mother's maiden name was, her mother's maiden name, even her father's mother's maiden name, try to look for her in the same place that you've been researching, but try looking for her under different surnames that are associated with the family. That would be the first place that I would start. And again, I would also start from the first image in the census that you can't find her on, which I would presume is the 1880 census. Start looking for her and her family group just by their first names. So unfortunately, it is a time-consuming thing to do it that way, starting for a first image on an image roll and working your way through every one of them. But that is a good place to start, and that's my best bet to get you started on that one. Jen Liu also asked a really good question. How do you document what you think is a name change if there are no official records? Do you just write a narrative? And I think she thinks her research leads her to believe that. So as we were saying, and what A.E. Barlow commented on, if you write a kind of a proof theorem, and you just start from point 1, point 2, point 3 to really kind of list and really expand on the reasons why you think you have the same person under a different name, would be a very good exercise.
Okay, go ahead, Danya.
Oh, thank you, D. Turner. D actually made a good flip side comment to the whole writing a theorem. She said basically writing a theorem is putting forth a blueprint that can be used to find similarities in the way one goes about investigating facts. It is actually a really good working practice to do
Go
it.
ahead, Danya.
Doing this makes researchers speak the same research language, which is a brilliant. Thank you, Deep.
Can you hear me?
Same research language point is a really
Yes.
good point.
Hey, Brian, can you hear me?
It's still really kind of. I can hear you better. It's not as staticky. It's not clear.
It's not as staticky.
Unfortunately, I have no research experience in Jamaica whatsoever, so I
Yeah, I'm having trouble. So go ahead and just keep it. Just go ahead and keep going. I'm listening, and I'll jump in on the comments because I'm having trouble.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't even hear you.
Oh, thank you, MK Clark kind of gave us some props. She's like, yeah, about having to be flexible when show topics don't exactly work out. Oh, D. Turner also made another really good point, responding to something that you said, Danya. We can also use folklore or family oral stories as part of this kind of research too. Remember that gossip has threads of facts that you use to verify fact from fiction. So kind of saying where there may be a little bit of smoke, there may actually be some fire. So again, kind of listen to those family oral histories. Okay. We mentioned the Peterson family. As far as I'm aware, there weren't two different branches. All of our Petersons that are on the Genealogy Adventures tree are all related. But they're split out between Abbeville, Edgefield, and Newbury. They're split out between those three places, but as far as I'm aware, it's all the same family, and DNA is changing that.
Mute your mic on Zoom, Danya.
Okay. Some named Georgian Aiken made the point some name changes are because the people couldn't write, and whoever wrote it down wrote what they thought the person said. You have no idea how painful that is to Danya and I. We have families, one side of the family will spell the name Tolbert, Tol. Another part of the same family will spell it Talbert, Tal. But those are usually pretty easy to work out. The other one for us are Child, Childs, or Childs, Chiles. And you kind of get it, you really do get a sense that they're spelling those names phonetically. But good point. Those are other factors to kind of consider when you're doing your research and not finding your people under the exact name that you think they should be under. And we have that with even first names. We have variations of the name Georgia Ann, Georgiana, Georgiana proliferate in our family. As well as the name, we were looking for a Savannah one. And for some reason, we figured out that Versey, Versey, was some sort of a shortened version of Savannah. I don't know how you get from Savannah to Versey, but that was another person that had kind of tripped Donnie and I up until we realized we were looking at the same person. So again, as we come up to the top of the hour, I am really, really sorry about how today kind of went, both in terms of technology and a guest that didn't show up. But thank you very much for bearing with us. Next week, we have an awesome show with Penny Waters, who is joining us from the UK to talk about genealogy research and ethics. She has a wonderful book on this entire subject, and really, really looking forward to having her on the show next week. So until then, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time next Sunday with Penny Waters. It has been a pleasure. My name is Brian Sheffy. Danya, who unfortunately is on mute. Danya, do you want to give a wave? And thank you all so much for joining us on Genealogy Adventures, and you have a blessed and wonderful rest of your Sunday. Take care.